So you've just built an amazing looking house in Minecraft, and as you admire your work of art, you walk inside and realize that you don't know how to build an interior. Well, today I'm going to share some knowledge on interior designing and walk you through my thought process when building the insides of my builds. So first, I'm going to change the color and texture of the floor. Now, depending on what you want your floor to look like, you could always use planks for a more wooden look, or blocks with smoother textures like concrete or quartz for more modern interiors. In this case, I've opted to use a combination of mud bricks, packed mud, dripstone and jungle logs for that desaturated brown color while keeping the rough stone feel to it. The floor is the basis of your build and it's essential for a good interior. Again, there are many ways on how to decorate your floor, so go ahead and try out some designs that you might like. There are many blocks with certain textures on top that make great floor patterns, such as smithing tables, blast furnaces, barrels, or even glazed terracotta if you use it right. Just for the record, I'm only going to show you the first layer of the build for this part, just so you can easily see how I'm decorating it, but don't worry, I'm going to show you a proper example later in the video. So once you've got your floor down, it's time to think about space. This aspect of interior design is so important and many people don't even use it. So let me talk about it. So when talking about space, what I'm actually talking about is how I can divide or section off parts of the interior to make rooms for the build. So all I've done is I've used red wool to mark the different divisions and rooms of the interior. Now the reason I've done this is so that when you walk inside of the build, instead of having a large empty space, it's going to be divided into smaller rooms that are much easier to digest. Doing this helps you easily decide on the interior by having certain spaces designed for certain purposes, such as a kitchen, a living room, or even a dining room. It's completely up to you. Another thing to be aware of when breaking up the building into separate rooms is the scale and size of your building. If your build is small, it might not always be possible to section off different parts inside with complete walls. However, the idea of making sections should still be considered, possibly with trapdoors or through height, which I'll talk about later. But just keep that in mind when doing this step. After you've decided on your floor plan, it's time to build up the walls. Hopefully, you have an idea of what type of color and texture you want for the walls. However, if you don't, using blocks that complement the floor and the rest of the build should work fine. Just make sure that the blocks you've chosen don't blend into the floor, because that effect isn't what we want. Now, there's another thing that I don't see a lot of people doing for their interior, and it's making their walls 2 blocks thick. By making your walls 2 blocks thick, you're firstly separating the outside wall from the inside, and you're starting to create an atmosphere for your interior. Now, there is one downside to this, and you are sacrificing space. However, if you have a build like mine, and it's kind of big, sacrificing that space is definitely worth it. Another thing we can do with this technique is we can overlap different transparent blocks to make really nice looking windows. So for example, I'm using white stained glass and spruce fences to make these windows, and from the inside it has a really nice effect, and from the outside too. So definitely try out this technique because you can do a lot of depth making and detail work. When decorating, it's not as simple as me telling you what to do step by step, but I can show you around how I decorated this build, and hopefully you can take away a few things from this. So when I decorate my interiors, I first think about what I'm actually going to use the room for. In this case, I've turned this room into a kitchen and a small storage room. Now, I did also change the design of the floor to this checkered pattern, and the reason I've done this is to really signify that this is a different room. In fact, I've actually done this for a few other places in this build, and in a way, it makes the inside feel a bit bigger than it is because it isn't copying any of the other floor designs of the other rooms. To keep the inside looking interesting, I always try to fill up all the walls with something so they don't feel that empty. For these walls, I've used a lot of paintings and trapdoors that act as shelves with plants on top. Actually, that's also another point. Having leafage inside your interior can really add to the atmosphere of your build, and having the occasional spot of green doesn't leave the inside feeling dead. Plus, it's also a great way of improving the liveliness and character of your build. So when you're doing your interior, my biggest tip is to try and learn different ways of filling up spaces by adding different decorations. So to finish up, we have to add in the ceiling and go a bit more in depth about lighting and how to make an immersive interior. So here I have a selection or collection of different ceiling designs that I personally quite like for this build, and all I'm going to do is show you one by one how you can use different block textures to make your ceilings. For the first one, I'm actually using smithing tables to use this special grid-like texture underneath because it has a really unique like mangrovey reddish wood that I think works quite well for the rest of the build. So this is an example of using unconventional blocks in building terms. So obviously you wouldn't normally use smithing tables to build in Minecraft because their texture is quite random, and I mean from the top it looks great. The side, I don't know how you could use that from the side, but the bottom and top texture is great. And if you want an alternative for mangrove wood, because I think it has a very similar color, let's use it. It has a pretty similar color. It's darker than mangrove wood, but if you want an alternative, this is great. And yeah, that grid texture is something that I really quite like for this, so that's very nice. Next, for this one, I just used spruce wood, but I did something different and I added slabs across the whole ceiling to change the shape a bit, because just the spruce texture on its own can sometimes be a bit boring because they all blend into each other. You see how it's a connected texture? So by adding slabs and changing the shape, you get this really nice effect, and it acts like support beams across the whole ceiling, so I quite like it. If you want to use spruce, definitely, or any wood type actually, definitely mess with the shape of the ceiling. Over here we've got probably one of my most favorite blocks to use as a ceiling, and it's the loom. So from the top and the sides we've got the loom texture. Like, most people know what it looks like, but not many know what it not many people know what it looks like from the bottom. And it has this really nice dark wooden texture with stripes on it that is really unique to Minecraft, because I don't know if there's any other block that does this quite the same like the loom. And I didn't even know the loom had this texture. I always assumed it had like a wooden oak plank texture on it, but it has this really nice color, and that stripe pattern, yeah, again, it's really nice. A friend pointed this out to me actually. That's when I started to use it. And yeah, again, this is similar to the smithing table, where it's a use of unconventional blocks, because the loom, you know, it's a block you use to make banners or whatever. But again, using like special and unique textures that you don't normally see for the ceiling really makes it look great. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned using blast furnaces as floor designs, and the top texture of the blast furnace is actually the same on the bottom, and it has this really nice grid texture with different shades of grey, and it's a bit different to many of the other blocks because, especially from the inside, you notice that there's different pixels of grey, and that means it doesn't blend all together because there's different colours, and it works really well for the ceiling and the floor, and it's just a great block I use personally when I build a lot of my things. Another block similar to the blast furnace is the smoker, where it's got this pretty nice cobblestone stony texture on the bottom. The top is different, it's got these circles, and the one thing I love about smokers is when you join 4 blocks together, you get this, you get the circle, and circles in Minecraft, you know, this is a block game, so making circles is difficult, and if you want small little details and circles, the smoker can really make these look really nice, especially because it's a different color, it's this brown color. It complements all the wooden textures in this build quite nice. So again, using the smoker in your builds as well as the blast furnace, they go really well. And yeah, this block is amazing. I love using the cauldron in many of my different builds, but for the ceiling, it has this really cool texture. Again, with the circles, similar to the smoker, the cauldron makes these metallic dark grey circles, as well as the bottom texture, you can kind of see it. The only problem I'd say that I have with the cauldron is, well, we know that Minecraft lighting isn't the greatest, and because the cauldron from the top, obviously, it isn't a full block, it lets light through, so sometimes it's quite difficult to make this blend in with the roof, because, I mean, everything's like bright, everything's so bright because the cauldron's letting light pass through it. But other than that, I really quite like using the cauldron, especially in supports, because you can use fences to act as beams and use the circle texture as like the base for it. And yeah, it's very cool. So those were a few ceiling designs, and now we're going to talk about how you can add light to your builds and make an atmosphere. Now, starting in the kitchen, let's talk about lighting. So in Minecraft, there are two different types of lighting in building, let's say. And number one is artificial. So those are the blocks you can place, such as lanterns, candles, end rods, jack-o'-lanterns even, and torches. I think there's a few more, but those are the ones I would use for this build. But the second one is the one that I use the most, and it is natural lighting. So like I said before, using the technique of making your walls 2 blocks thick, we can punch out holes and make really cool looking windows. So for example, let's use scaffolding and let's use glass panes. So just doing this, it allows light to pass through, and you get this really cool window design. So for this build, I'm going to do that a bunch and just show you how the lighting really affects the interior of the build. After adding in these windows, you can immediately notice that there's so much more light entering the build, which not only makes the inside brighter, but also creates more space because you don't feel as enclosed. Now, when you're adding in lighting, don't go overboard and spam different light sources everywhere. Try to be mindful of spaces where there would be light and spaces where there wouldn't be as much light, and base your decision of lighting on those principles. Finally, to finish up with this interior, we're going to add the finishing touches to this build and make it feel super immersive. Now, throughout this entire video, we've used a bunch of different techniques that makes this build, in my opinion, feel super cozy, but there's one thing that I haven't spoken about, and that's particles. So in Minecraft, there's one block that emits particles that I use when I build, and it's the Spore Blossom. Now this block is super cool. If you didn't know what it does, it emits these green particles that come in different sizes, and they move in such a dynamic way that adds that element of movement and makes your build feel super alive. So if you want to add or create an immersive atmosphere, having this block is super cool. There's a few other blocks in the game that do the same thing, such as the campfire and candle. Now these blocks are super cool because of the fire and smoke particle that they emit. And I've used it in like this baking oven type thing, and the candles are there for the lighting, and I've used quite a few recently in many of my builds, but in this one I've used quite a lot. Now the thing is, the rule is basically, when making your interior, having that element of movement is really what makes this build feel super immersive. So when doing your interior, try to think about how you can make your build come to life. Now, I'm just going to showcase how you can incorporate all those different ideas, plus a few extra ones, into a house like this. So when you enter the build, you're greeted with this little area, which is just a bunch of storage and a nice big open window, which gives you a pretty nice view. Now, I did say I was going to speak about height, which I will quickly run down. So in interiors, it's great to have a bit of height variation, because if you don't want to add a wall, having a height variation signifies, again, a different room. So here I've used staircases, and here I've used slabs to just show that these are different parts of the build. So it's really nice if you want to have a bit of variation, and it gives you a different perspective to view from. Over here we've got a kitchen and another little storage room because I didn't know what to fill it with. And here's a basement door that leads to nothing, which is, you know, always fun. We've got a little armor stand here. Now you probably noticed the particles, which is a really nice touch, and I really quite like it. So yeah, those spore blossoms are very useful to have. As we go upstairs, we're greeted by a few plants, my dog who's happy to be here, I think, a sniffer egg for decoration, some paintings here and there, and again with the shelves and leaves. But the most noticeable thing, I think, are the windows. Now these windows let in a lot of natural light, and because we're in not a flat world, you get this pretty cool view from the inside. And if you're bothered to terraform the outside of your build, which I'll definitely make a video on, this place can look really cool. Now here's the bedroom. This bedroom's pretty basic, I'd say. We've got a few shelves again, another large window, a bookcase, this desk, a storage area. And you know, other than that, this house is pretty simple. Here's another storage room and more windows and leafage and all that stuff. But you know, we've incorporated a bunch of the techniques that I spoke about in this video, especially in the downstairs area, with the particles and all those little details that really make this build immersive. So even with this small scale build, you can really change the interior quite a lot, and from the outside you wouldn't expect it to be that filling, I guess, if that makes sense. So that's how I build my interiors in Minecraft. I'm sure there are many extra things I missed out in this video, but those should be the basics to make a build good looking on the inside. Before I go, I just want to thank you guys for the support on last video, and if you have any ideas for me on what I should cover next, let me know. Other than that, it's like 1 AM right now, so I'm going to end it here, and I'll catch you guys later.